Well, good morning and welcome to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I'm so glad that you've joined us this Friday morning. We have a very, very exciting show in store for you. How about this? First, we're going to talk in the 6 o'clock hour with Christine Towner. She's going to tell us about the Senior Companion program that's coming up this hour. In the 7 o'clock hour, we have a very important update, very important conversation with the chair of the Steuben County Legislature, Kelly Fitzpatrick. She's going to be joining us again. This is my second or third time on the program. But obviously there's a lot going on at the county level. We're going to ask her about the litigation with Sheriff Jim Allard. I know you all look forward to updates on that, so we're going to talk to her directly about that, just how her first year as chair has went, some of the surprises, et cetera, et cetera. That is in the 7 o'clock hour. In the meantime, we have a lot to cover, so let's get right to it. Let's start with messages from viewers, either right after yesterday's program or throughout the day. And if you are new to the show, you see the number on the bottom of the screen. You can reach out at any time, day or night, to comment on the topics of the day. First off, yesterday we had a comment from someone, and I'm just paraphrasing, but it was, let's sit back and relax and see how the good Trump is going to do. Well, this comment coming in after the program, I'd like to sit back and enjoy the ride, but I guess I'm not optimistic. I don't think that we've seen anything yet. We need to hope for the best and prepare for the worst, in my opinion. We allowed evil in, and we can't get complacent. I think there's a point to be made, and it ties in with the next comment from a different viewer. Ties in perfectly because we know in the past, specifically in 2016, but since, every day since, the attacks on Trump through the media, through the bureaucrats, through, as he calls it, the deep state or the swamp. And we saw that, and this is going to tie in with this next comment, with the Supreme Court's decision yesterday. We'll talk about that in just a second, but let's read this comment first. I just heard the decision that the Supreme Court made on the hush money case and the sentencing to be held today. I'm so disgusted and disappointed with this, and with Amy Coney Barrett in particular. But more importantly, why should McCann be trusted to do what he claims he won't do? What would happen if Trump doesn't show up? Thoughts. Couple things. I was on the same page as you, but I'm not now, and I'll explain why. I was very disappointed. Very disappointed. Still am with the Supreme Court's decision, and specifically Amy Coney Barrett. But there's a piece by Andrew McCarthy, where, and again, I know many are outraged, and if you're wondering what we're talking about, the Supreme Court denied Trump's bid to halt the sentencing that will happen today in New York City over the hush money case. And this eased my mind a little bit. It does not make it right. I still think it's frustrating. But in a ruling last week denying Trump's post-trial motions and scheduling sentencing for Friday morning, Judge McCann indicated that he would sentence Trump to an unconditional discharge. Again, this is coming from Andrew McCarthy, meaning no jail time, no probation, no fine, and no post-sentencing monitoring of any kind. McCann also ruled that Trump would not need to attend the sentencing in person. So to your point, he does not need to attend. The president-elect has announced that he will not be in attendance at the courthouse in Lower Manhattan on Friday. He will attend the sentencing remotely to minimize the burden the proceeding will place on the ongoing transition leading up to the inauguration day on January 20th. Now, the majority rationalized, meaning in the Supreme Court, that Trump will not be meaningfully harmed by the sentencing for two principal reasons. First, the court did not rule on the merits of Trump's contention that presidential immunity from criminal prosecution was violated by the district attorney's introduction at trial of evidence of his official presidential acts. That is, Trump will still be able to raise on appeal his immunity claim, along with various other claims of significant error in the proceedings. I know this is a little wonky. The appeal cannot proceed, this is important, until Trump is sentenced and the judgment is entered. So sentencing will clear the way for that process. Now, I know this is frustrating for many because, as we have learned in this process, that Trump is not a convicted felon until he's sentenced. Many did not realize that, myself included, until as of recently, because the media and the Democrats were so quick to throw around convicted felon. Technically, legally, you are not convicted of anything until the sentencing. So that's why, as we had that piece on yesterday's program, saying that McCann has almost a Captain Ahab type, how do they say, I can't think of the exact term they use, so I'm not even going to try, but that he is almost just this lust to get Trump is the only word I can think of. This passion, this anger towards Trump, and he wants to convict him of being a felon. They want him to be the first president to be a convicted felon. So it's almost psychotic in his attempts to get Trump. But now we go to the second point that Andrew McCarthy makes on this. The court effectively locked McCann, and this I think is the most important part of this. The court effectively, meaning the Supreme Court, effectively locked McCann into his stated inclination to give Trump a conditional discharge sentence. To that viewer's point, and what my initial reaction is, he says he's going to do all this, which is very, I'm not going to use the word unprecedented, but you don't normally signal what the sentencing is going to be before you sentence somebody. So I, too, was like that viewer, and I have my concerns that he could get in there and say, nope, never mind. I know I said that, but since everything else has been not by the book, I am going to throw you in jail or fine you or whatever the case may be. But according to this, the court has now locked McCann into that decision to give him a unconditional discharge. In theory, McCann's signaling of that intention in a written opinion last week was not binding. And that's why we had the concerns, because just writing an op-ed essentially is not binding. Technically, a judge is not supposed to decide the sentence until hearing from the parties at the sentencing proceedings, which would not happen until today, this morning. Nevertheless, the Supreme Court majority's conclusion that the sentencing poses minimal burden on Trump's presidential transition hinges on McCann's assurance that he will be leaning towards a no jail, no probation sentence. If McCann were to change his mind at this point and impose a term of incarceration, the High Court would regard it as a betrayal. Practically speaking, then, McCann has no choice but to do what he indicated he would do. The majority also relied on McCann's directive that Trump did not need to attend the sentencing in person, meaning the proceeding should be brief and minimally intrusive to Trump's conduct of the presidential transition. So with the president-elect having exhausted his avenues to prevent the sentencing, it will proceed today, this morning. Like a number of analysts, McCarthy opined that there are multiple grounds for reversing Trump's conviction on appeals. The appellate process cannot begin until sentencing is opposed. So no, I do not believe it's a good thing, ultimately, the way the Supreme Court decided. But having said that, Andrew McCarthy's piece puts a little bit of that concern to rest. Now, again, McCann has done some pretty outlandish things. So you never know until it's all done this morning. And we'll wait patiently for that to find out exactly what happens in that Manhattan court. But according to Andrew McCarthy, who serves as the Fox News contributor and is a senior fellow at the National Review Institute, he believes that this is actually a part of the process that needed to be done. And that because the Supreme Court made this decision, they have locked McCann into sticking by that idea that it'll be unconditional discharge. But if you are just waking up and you had not heard this story, it was a 5-4 decision. The High Court ruled that the burden the sentencing would impose on Trump's White House transition responsibilities would be minimal, and that any complaints the president-elect has with evidentiary violations in the case could be dealt with by lower courts. Now, to that viewer's comment, many are upset because it was Amy Coney Barrett and John Roberts, kind of a typical Supreme Court Republican, meaning he'll very often go with the Democrats. That's something about Republicans picking their judges. They don't get that, for lack of a better term, blind loyalty to the Republican Party or to conservative values, but yet Democrats very often do. They get those Supreme Court justices that will always go to the left. But Chief Justice John Roberts and fellow conservative, again, arguing the point that John Roberts is conservative, but we'll save that for another day. And fellow conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett joined the 3 liberal justices in the majority. Conservative Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh sided with Trump in the minority. The president-elect weighed in on it yesterday, saying, "I'm the first president and probably one of the first candidates in history that's under attack with a gag order where I'm not allowed to speak about something. This is a long way from finished, and I respect the court's opinion." Trump said he thought the court's ruling was a very good opinion for us, noting that justices invited the appeal. "We'll see how it all works out. I think it's going to go well." He then reflected on the lawfare that he has been a victim of, saying it was an attack on the Republican Party. I would also argue an attack on those that vote for Trump. But, quote, "This was an attack on the Republican candidate who just won an election by record numbers, the highest number of Republican votes by far ever gotten. And we won all the swing states. We won the popular vote by millions of people. They tried to stop that from happening. They tried to stop the election from happening or to bloody somebody up so badly they couldn't win. The people got it, and we won by the largest number." And I think he's right. You've heard me say it before. I think Alvin Bragg, Letitia James, anybody that uses kind of lawfare against the now president-elect Donald Trump, if you're a Democrat, you should put the blame squarely on them in many instances. Because to quote Trump from that rally, well, to paraphrase Trump from that rally months and months ago, probably over a year ago now, "I'm one indictment away from the White House," and he was exactly right. It led to his ultimately winning the presidency with record numbers. We got to take our first break. When we come back, and I would love to hear your opinion on that decision by the Supreme Court. I, too, am still upset over it. I just felt that Andrew McCarthy's, I don't want to say spin, that sounds loaded, but take on it kind of eased many's minds. Also, what Donald Trump had to say himself kind of eased that worry. We're going to talk about the wildfires. We do have a couple of local issues here that we have to get to. And maybe I'll start with that, and then we'll go to the wildfires because there's an update, and it is Friday. There is an update from Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, who is going to be on the program next Friday. But I want to tell you what Phil's up to on Phil Friday. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Okay, we are back with Frankly Speaking, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. People are up and at 'em on this Friday morning. Let's get to some of the comments. Good morning. Well, hey, good morning. Question: even though the lawfare against Trump was politically motivated by the Democrats, was our tax dollars used to prosecute him? Yes. If so, how much did it cost? I have no idea. I don't know if they've put a number on that. Well, let's put it this way. To defend former and disgraced Governor Andrew Cuomo against that harassment case, New York State taxpayers who had to pay for the bill, foot the bill for Cuomo's lawyers, it cost us, what was the last number I heard? $28 million. And remember, Cuomo doesn't want you to bring up that number. They actually tried to, I don't know if gag order is the right term, but trying to get that young woman's lawyers to stop spreading the word that taxpayers are on the hook $28 to $29 million for Cuomo's legal defense. So if that is one case from the governor, how much do you think this lawfare costs us? I have not seen a number put on that, and though numbers don't always stick in my head that well, I think that's one that would. In so many multi-millions of dollars, it would be shocking. So yes, the lawfare, who in a weird way could be seen as a campaign donation because it helped Trump get into the White House, that did cost taxpayers a lot of money. All right. So good point, though. Something that we should continue to bring up so people are aware that it's not just about attacking a candidate for president because they have an R next to their name, not trying to tell you who you can and can't vote for. It's not just that. It's also the cost to us as taxpayers. Next up, comment from a different viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. Just want to thank viewer Ken in advance for tuning into Hochul on the 14th for me, so I can save what's left of my gut health. I'll wait for your recap. Uh-oh, Ken. If you're tuning in this morning, Ken, you just got drafted by another viewer wanting you to do the dirty work of watching Hochul's State of the State. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you got yourself into this, Ken, but I appreciate it. A quick update from Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, and a big congratulations to him. He was reappointed to the Assembly Republican Conference leadership team. He is Assistant Minority Leader. Congratulations, Phil. In addition to this, he will also continue to serve as ranking member of the Assembly Energy Committee as well. And that's why we always have him on to talk about energy. And he's got a great op-ed out. We're talking to him next Friday. We're going to talk to him about the Climate Change Super Fund and other energy issues as well. So he is now the ranking member for the Assembly Energy Committee. He also serves on the Corporations, Authorities, and Commissions, Corrections, Corporations, Authorities, and Commissions, Correction, Insurance, Rules, and Ways and Means Committees. Whew. Palmisano has served as the Assistant Minority Leader since 2020 and the ranking member on the Assembly Energy Committee since 2013. This is what he had to, where's the exact quote? Oh, no, it's a quote. Oh, here we go. I want to thank Leader Barclay, this is Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, for his continued trust and confidence he has placed in me to continue serving our conference as part of his leadership team, as well as the opportunity to continue as the ranking member of the Energy Committee. New Yorkers want more balance in our state government that has been dominated by one-party Democrat rule since 2019. We must work together to prioritize and address the affordability, public safety, and quality of life crisis that is plaguing our families and communities throughout the state in the upcoming 2025 legislative session. So congratulations to Assemblyman Phil Palmisano. That's a local update. Breaking news, which you can only get right here on Frankly Speaking. And we will have the Assemblyman in next Friday, and I'm going to talk with Joe. I did send Assemblyman Joe Sempolinski your well wishes after we played his swearing-in ceremony, and we're going to get working on when to have him back on the program. Okay. Let's talk about the wildfires. Breaking news coming in late last night. A homeless man was taken into custody in connection to the Kenneth Fire in LA's West Hills. It was actually residents that detained him. One person has been taken into custody in connection to the Kenneth Fire, which erupted Thursday afternoon in the Los Angeles West Hills as ferocious wildfires continue to tear through Southern California. So that, not all of, I want to be clear, not all of the fires were due to arson. That's just one case, because people were asking yesterday what is to blame for all of this. Depending on who you talk to, many people are blaming, well, one actor was blaming climate change deniers, others blaming just climate change in general. Before we talk about Mayor Karen Bass and the disastrous job her and Governor Newsom are doing, did you see Biden's joke? And we can talk about Carter's funeral. Did you watch Carter's funeral yesterday? I know the big talk is Trump and Obama butting around, being best pals there for a little bit. The awkwardness of Mike Pence's wife not shaking Trump's hand. The awkwardness of George W. Bush, avoiding Trump but kind of hitting the belly of Obama. There's a lot of different kind of soap opera-esque type things going on with that. We could talk about that a little bit later on. But Biden made what some are calling a disgusting, and I don't know if you could call it a joke, but he convened senior administrative officials to address the federal response to the Pacific Palisades wildfires that have continued to rage through the country, forcing the displacement of thousands of California citizens and destroying thousands of homes. I think the number, and I think this is even lowballing, I think they said it's about $50 billion in damage as of right now. After briefing the public on the federal government's plan to help local officials during the disaster, Biden gave the floor to Vice President Kamala Harris, who hails from California. And then he made this joke. Quote, "Madam Vice President, I know you're directly affected, so you fire away." No pun intended. But this comes off the heels of that press conference where he said he started about the wildfires, not press conference. Well, I guess it was press conference, a speech where he started, "Hey, great news. I'm a grandfather." And then he went on to talk about a family member who thought they lost their house, but good news, they didn't. Yeah. Many calling it tone deaf. Conservative writer Ben Q saying probably not the best time to be making puns. Yeah. But obviously an awkward, kind of a disgusting joke. But is it as bad as the way Karen Bass has handled this? as Gavin Newsom. By the way, Ron DeSantis going after a reporter. We're going to talk about that when we come back because I don't want to run too late. And coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk with Christine Towner about the Senior Companion Program, so stay tuned for that. But we do have a few things here about the fires and many other topics. I know we have two guests this morning, but we're going to have plenty of time to talk. So get those comments in, keep those waves coming in, and we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them, I should say, today for all your business and home security needs. Everybody's active out there this morning. Getting a lot of waves, getting a lot of comments. Thank you for joining us as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. So Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass started the day yesterday pretty poorly, telling people to visit URL for further assistance. Now, what I'm sure she meant to say is the actual URL, the actual website, but she was reading it so scripted. She said, if you need help, emergency information, resources, and shelter is available. All of this can be found at URL. Los Angeles, together is how we will get through this, she continued, not correcting her blatant error. Charlie Kirk commented, this is a perfect picture of the incredible levels of incompetence ravaging Los Angeles right now. It has been very interesting to this is unrelated to Charlie Kirk, but the celebrities that have been affected by this, calling out the extreme left policies of California. You know, it's finally coming home to them and hitting them that, yes, this virtue signaling has led to, unfortunately, the destruction of so much of California. And we're going to talk about that in just a moment with some opinion pieces. But it has opened the eyes of what you would call some Hollywood progressives that are activists who are now saying, wait a minute, what did we do here? You know, and keep in mind, you look at with Karen Bass cutting the budget to $17 million for wildfires, while putting the rest of that money into the homeless population, and it was not spent. But LA Mayor Karen Bass snapped back at a reporter yesterday after grilling her over her response to the out-of-control wildfires. She's obviously in the wrong. She's obviously embarrassed herself time and time again, and it sounds like she's trying to, and it may happen, make it go away. She knows many in the media will not cover it because she has that D next to her name. Same with Gavin Newsom, not getting the criticism. And Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida had an amazing point on this we'll get to in just a moment. But Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass became evasive as reporters grilled her over her city's preparedness, keeping in mind that she was thousands of miles away while this had happened. Even though she was well aware that these winds were likely, she still decided to visit that taxpayer-funded trip to Ghana. And she also slashed the firefighting budget by tens of millions of dollars. A CBS News reporter said LA County is in a panic state, describing how his crew arrived after the Palisades fire erupted on Tuesday, but for several hours didn't see any fire engines or official response, and instead watched bystanders direct traffic and attempt to maintain order themselves. You were out of the country at the time. What explains this lack of preparation and rapid response? Rather than answering, this is such a political answer, she immediately deflected and said that for now, quote, we have to protect lives, we have to save lives, and we have to save homes. Rest assured, when that is done, when we are safe, when lives have been saved and homes have been saved, we will absolutely do an evaluation to look at what worked, what didn't work, and to correct or hold accountable anybody, department, individual, etc. That was not good enough for the reporter. For the reporter. So another reporter asked essentially the same question. She said, I just said what I believe is the most important thing for us to do right now. The mayor also provided little comment on the water shortages that left hydrants across the city dry. We also know hydrants are not designed to deal with this type of massive devastation, and that the number one problem, especially on Wednesday, was the fact that we weren't able to do air support because of the wind. Rest assured, that must be the term this morning, rest assured. As soon as we're done here, I will follow up with that. Well, thank goodness you're going to follow up after the destruction. The budget approved last year by Bass cut mostly administrative jobs, but also axed about $7 million from its overtime budget, which was used in part to prepare for fire disasters. Los Angeles Fire Chief Kristen Crowley warned Mayor Bass just weeks ago in a memo that the budget reduction had, quote, severely limited the department's capacity to prepare for, train for, and respond to large-scale emergencies, including wildfires. I think it's the most important to understand that we are in a tough budgetary time. Everybody knew that, but the impact of our budget really did not impact what we've been going through over the last few days, the mayor said. Really? Interesting. By the way, as she was in Ghana, and this is what's troubling but also helpful about tweets and about X. Remember, Karen Bass was in Ghana as the fires began. Even though she was warned about the winds and that this could be a real serious problem, she wanted to take the opportunity to go on that taxpayer-funded trip. Well, back in 2021, February 19th of 2021, to be exact, Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass tweeted out, and if you recall at the time, Senator Ted Cruz was receiving some heat for going to Cancun, Mexico, as there was a big winter storm in Texas, and the media just latched onto that. It was a huge story for a long time, showing you the difference between the media's coverage of a Republican and a Democrat, and we'll get to that with DeSantis in a moment. This is what Karen Bass tweeted on February 19th, 2021. Quote, Ted Cruz fleeing Texas in the middle of a deadly crisis is part of a larger pattern of the GOP abandoning folks in crisis. We need to build a movement to kick them off. Now, Bass left for Ghana before the wildfire started. She still faced condemnation over the trip and fierce criticism of her leadership. So how it's changed. And that's why, well, I keep saying I'm going to mention what, because we've got what what Newsom has been saying. No, let's keep talking. What am I doing? Yesterday, we brought to you that he had started blaming local officials. The buck stops, anywhere else but Gavin Newsom, because Gavin Newsom wants to run for president. A lot of people in the media want Gavin Newsom to run for president. So they don't want this type of criticism of his leadership, why the state is literally on fire as he focuses on these woke ideologies, these DEI initiatives. A distraught Los Angeles mother confronted Governor Newsom yesterday in what were the ashen remains of her neighborhood, demanding to know what he was doing about the wildfires devouring the city. To which the embattled governor claimed he was calling President Biden for federal support, but just couldn't get reception. So first it was local officials, now his phone doesn't work. This is like the Keystone Cops between him and Karen Bass. Governor, I live here. That was my daughter's school, said resident Rachel Dervish. What are you going to do for her? Newsom, holding up his phone, said he was literally calling the president to see about organizing help at that very moment. But when Dervish asked him to prove it, Newsom said he had no reception. So what that is, and you see this for politicians a lot, Harris did it, and they were kind of mocking her because it was clear that her phone wasn't being used. But, they'll walk by and do this, sorry, I'm on the phone, that kind of thing. That's what Newsom was doing. Can I hear it? Can I hear your call? Because I don't believe you, Dervish said. Newsom responded, I've tried 5 times. That's why I'm walking around to make the call. I'm so sorry, especially for your daughter. Dervish then demanded to know what Newsom was doing to help the community and why things ended up the way they did. Why was there no water in the hydrants, Governor? Is it going to be different next time? He replied in a hushed tone, it has to be. It has to be, of course. I'm doing everything I can. I will do whatever I can. She shot back, but you're not. Newsom eventually climbed back into his car, saying he was going to call the president, while Dervish kept asking for an opportunity to at least tell people what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're doing. One of the predominant complaints has been that the fire hydrants running out of water as firefighters try to douse the blazes, a problem Newsom passed off on, quote, local folks during an interview Wednesday night. Look, the local folks are trying to figure that out, claiming the hydrants weren't designed to handle mass fires. I mean, those hydrants aren't typical for 2 or 3 fires, maybe 1 fire, and you have something on this scale. But again, that's going to be determined by the local. Trump calling on Newsom to resign. This is all your fault, he said in a truth post. President-elect Trump said, fire is spreading rapidly for 3 days. 0 containment. Nobody has ever seen such failed numbers before. Gross incompetence by Gavin Newsom, he calls him Newsom, and Karen Bass. And Biden's FEMA has no money. All wasted on the Green New scam. LA is a total wipeout. So instead of the media focusing on the failures of Newsom or of Mayor Bass, they're trying to focus on Trump, quote unquote, politicizing it. Can you imagine that? They have not learned from November. So DeSantis was asked a question by a reporter if it was appropriate for Trump to criticize Gavin Newsom as deadly wildfires rage. Why would it not be appropriate when we see the utter lack of leadership? DeSantis took the bait, for lack of a better word. He jumped right in to step forward and said, is it appropriate for people in your industry to try to create division and to try to create narratives anytime these things happen? Meaning that industry, of course, meaning the media. Now you're not as interested in doing that because Newsom is AD. If Newsom was a Republican, you guys would go try, you would have had him nailed to the wall for what they're doing over there. The Florida governor, who has managed multiple disasters during his tenure, said he has often been criticized for things that were out of his control and had been blamed for incidents before the facts came out. I think your track record of politicizing these things is very, very bad, DeSantis told the reporter. He said Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass would be treated much differently for her trip to Ghana while fires were at high risk if she were Republican. Quote, you should have been there preparing and doing that. And yet, I don't see a lot of heat being directed towards her. I'd like to see some balance on how this is done. You could criticize the president-elect, but you also have to hold these other people accountable. And I have not seen that. He's exactly right. He could have even been more forceful. That's not a criticism of DeSantis. But if these were Republicans, Karen Bass or Newsom, they'd be calling for resignations in the media. It would be the major story involving the wildfires. But instead, they're trying to keep it buried, specifically with Newsom. With Bass, too. They're not talking about our trip to Ghana. They're ignoring it when you read the articles. But with Newsom, they know that he was, I don't know if he still is, though I think so, the way the Democrat Party works, is the essential front runner for 2028. So keep that in mind as you see why they're handling this story with kid gloves. Ooh, we have a lot of comments coming in. Here's a comment from one viewer. It's what they do. They're insensitive and largely immune to the pain others suffer. It only matters when it hurts them, meaning the celebrities, I assume. Yes, it is. It's interesting that they've come around, and it wasn't about the suffering before that. It's when, and this isn't a criticism, but when their multi-million-dollar mansions get burnt to the ground, they start to realize, whoa, these woke policies that people have been talking about for so long, maybe that's not where our money and our attention should have been directed. Our tax-paying dollars shouldn't have been there, but maybe on what helps people. There's actually a really good, I'm just going to read the headline by Douglas Murray. Our leaders praise diversity without prioritizing what the public really needs. And this is a prime example of that. Comment from a viewer. Good morning, Frank. Well, hey, good morning. I saw in the news those people in certain places were told to hunker in place, and where, meaning the people of LA, and where they didn't know how many were dead. I don't get that ideology. I did not hear that. I did not hear that they were told to hunker down and stay put, because that would have been another disastrous decision by leadership. Here's another comment. Frank, I'd like to text into your show, but I have no reception. Yes, that's the Gavin Newsom idea. That's exactly what it is. I have no reception. Did not want to get called out for his lack of leadership. And again, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is spot on. The coverage of this would be completely different if Bass or Newsom were a Republican. Well, for heaven's sakes, it was different when Karen Bass back in 2021 was criticizing Ted Cruz for being out of his state when there was a winter storm. And while she was fast forward, in Ghana, even though she knew of the likelihood or the high risk alert of fires, was in Ghana on that taxpayer-funded trip. We've got a couple other things here, what people are saying about Newsom and others, but we've got to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk with our friend Christine Towner. She's going to tell us all about the Senior Companion Program. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact Boss Security for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. Here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, and this is the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. And joining us in the studio this morning is Christine. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Hi.
You've got an exciting program coming up. We were talking off the air, and I'm so glad this is getting started in Steuben County. Tell us about the Senior Companion Program.
Yeah, so Senior Companion is an AmeriCorps Seniors program, which is sponsored through the Office for the Aging. Okay. It is a fantastic program. We've had RSVP for 50 years in Steuben County. We're now expanding. We've got a Senior Companion Program. It is a program that matches older adults with other older adults for independent living services.
What a great idea. I've got to imagine this is a scenario where you really become friends more than being a companion, I guess is the same thing, right?
that is the goal. They're senior companions because it's an opportunity to make friends with somebody.
What led to the creation of this program? It was just time?
So there's a lot of need. Mm-hmm. As you know, the population in Steuben County and in the country is getting older.
Sure.
So there's, it's ready for something like this. So the big thing with this is we are looking for people to become stipend volunteers.
Oh, okay.
So they get a small payment for every hour of volunteer service that they perform, along with mileage reimbursement and other expenses reimbursements. The most fantastic thing about this is not counted as income for the individual. This is prohibited from being counted as income. So it is basically tax-free money that doesn't affect your income. So if you're a person that's looking to volunteer and maybe on some benefits like HEAP or SNAP or Medicaid, mm-hmm. this will not affect your benefits.
That's great. Because that could have been the deciding factor for a lot of people.
Right. And, typically people who are a little challenged financially are less likely to volunteer. Mm-hmm. Even with our RSVP program, we've had volunteers that were, say, participating with volunteer transportation for people. Mm-hmm. We'd call them and ask them if they were available to give a ride, and they would say, I would really love to, but I just don't have the gas money this week. Sure. And this takes that away.
That's wonderful. I wish some of the things I volunteered for were stipends.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before. Now, let's say you're thinking about volunteering. We're going to get into what people need to know if they want to volunteer. Does it have to be, quote unquote, strangers? What if it's a family member that I want to help? Can they take part, or is that something separate?
We can maybe make some exceptions. Mm-hmm. It's a, kind of like a case by case basis.
Gotcha.
So we're going to take a look at the situation. We're going to see what we can do.
Sure.
We don't want to necessarily promote that, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities.
Sure, I understand. I just trying to answer all these questions because I think people are learning about this, and this is brand new for you too. Has it been a little bit of a learning curve trying to get this off the ground?
Oh yeah. So we were awarded the grant back in July.
Okay.
We've been networking with other senior companion programs from Buffalo to Pensacola, Florida, to try to develop our policies and procedures and get things ready. And now we're at a point where we can look for volunteers.
So what should if someone's watching this right now and they think, maybe I want to volunteer, what should they know?
Well, first of all, they have to be at least age 55.
Okay.
And have a really caring heart.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's pretty easy.
Exactly. That they're interested in this sort of work.
I hope someone didn't just hear that and say, "Oh, I don't have a caring heart. I guess I can't do it."
I know. It's hard to think that somebody doesn't.
Yeah, right. But so that's really all to get off the ground, and then you help them along in the process, right? They're not going in blind.
No, not at all. Mm-hmm. So RSVP is a little bit different. We're very much more inclusive. You basically talk to us. We match you with a volunteer opportunity with another agency. We put you there, and there's no qualification. There are a lot of qualifications that need to be looked at before somebody becomes a senior companion.
So back to your point of it's a case-by-case basis, really.
Correct. So we'll have an income background check, income application process. So we're going to take a look at your finances to see if you meet our qualifications to receive a stipend. Okay. If you do, fantastic. If you don't, fantastic. We'll still have you. You just won't receive a stipend. Mm-hmm. Then there's a background check and a medical clearance, just to make sure that you're healthy enough to be able to help out somebody else.
And what are, for lack of a better word, your responsibilities if you volunteer?
You'll be seeing the same individual at least once a week for a few hours.
Okay.
You go in, and it's things like, having lunch with them.
Okay.
or helping them read through their mail, helping them work with their bills so that they don't fall behind on their bills. Perhaps they're visually impaired, they can't see their bills, and so now you're helping them with that. Transportation is a big part of this as well. Not a requirement for the volunteers, but it's definitely something that we're allowed, and makes us different from an aid service. So when an aid comes in to help somebody, they're not allowed to transport. Our volunteers are allowed to transport.
Oh, wow. And this sounds like it's going to be a rewarding position for both the clients and the volunteers. Isn't
Total win-win.
Yeah. I got, like I said, I got to imagine this leads to fresh friendships. How about that? I created a new term.
There we go. We're going to use that.
Yes. Fresh friendships. That's something to say. So tell us a little bit about how people can become prepared to be a volunteer. I know you have upcoming classes.
Yeah, so it is a training process. There is a pretty heavy training requirement, so about 20 hours of training before being introduced to a client. And then we allow you to do some kind of on-the-job training after that, basically classroom training, so that you're feeling comfortable before you're kind of like released on your own. So we're here to support our volunteers completely.
Now, how does someone, we know how people can become a volunteer. We'll find out more about that in just a second with the specifics. What if someone is looking at this and saying, this would be perfect for a loved one or perfect for myself as a client? How does that work?
Yeah, so we are looking for clients as much as we are looking for volunteers.
Really? Oh, that's interesting.
So that is, right now our model is to give the Office for the Aging a call and take a look at our ISIP program, which is the expanded in-home care for elderly program. ISIP is a big acronym. But that is our program in Office for the Aging, where we're supporting independent living, and we're linking right up with that as we launch our senior companion program.
What do you think the biggest hurdle is? Is it that people maybe don't know that these amazing services are out there?
Yeah. Sometimes I think that Office for the Aging is the best kept secret in the
really
county.
That's a good point. So how does someone either become a volunteer or learn how they can become a client?
So give us a call at Office for the Aging at 607-664-2298. We'll be happy to talk to you. If you're interested in volunteering, Lorinda Tyler is our senior companion caseworker. She'll meet with you, work with you through the process. If you're interested in becoming a client, they'll transfer you to our ISIP department, and they'll take a look, and they'll have a caseworker take a look at your loved one to qualify for them for the programs.
And you want people to sign up as soon as possible for those classes, right?
Oh, yeah. So because it's a heavy load, we're looking at scheduling classes. It's not a one-on-one thing. It's a group training opportunity. So the more we can have in a group, the better off we are.
Okay, so contact you today to get signed up, because this is going to be amazing, not just for you, but also for the client. As we said, it's a win-win. It's a senior companion program. Brand new. That's so exciting.
It is.
Good
it's
luck
great.
with everything.
Thank
Congratulations. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks a lot.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Stay with us. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Give them a call today for all your business and home security needs. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thanks so much to Christine Towner for being our guest on this morning's broadcast. Coming up in the next hour, right at pretty much the top of the hour, we're going to be talking with Kelly Fitzpatrick. She's the chair of the Steuben County Legislature. I know that you are going to enjoy that interview. All right, we were talking about the fires. Did you see on Joe Rogan's show, Mel Gibson was his guest, and Rogan said, we were just talking about the wildfire situation and how crazy it is that they spent $24 billion last year on the homeless. And what did they spend on preventing these wildfires? Zero. Zip, Gibson said. He then went on to say, in 2019, I think Newsom said, I'm going to take care of the forest and maintain the forest and do all this kind of stuff. He didn't do anything. And on top of that, they cut the water off. I think all our tax dollars probably went to Gavin's hair gel. That's Mel Gibson. You have a lot of celebrities coming out and speaking out against those failed policies. And Douglas Murray, who I quoted earlier, said, there's an old saying that a conservative is a liberal who has been mugged by reality. Perhaps after the wildfire devastation in Los Angeles, we might also say that a person who has fallen out of love with the cult of diversity is a liberal whose home just burnt to the ground. Investigators are looking into the claims of multiple arson attacks that may well have started or whipped along these fires. A lot of blame is going to have to be apportioned out directly to the awful lot of people. But we can already say one thing with certainty, which is that the authorities in Los Angeles failed catastrophically, and there are reasons. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass was holidaying in Africa when the fires broke out. She stayed in Ghana despite a red flag warning being issued in the place she is meant to govern. I would also add that the trip to Africa, taxpayer funded. When she did return yesterday, even she could not have been blinded to the utter devastation. And while she first avoided media questions and then stumbled her way through a press conference, perhaps she began to sense that recently cutting millions of dollars from the fire department budget was not the wisest thing to do. In the last city budget, Bass slashed an incredible $17 million from the LAFD. And while individual firefighters have fought heroically to try to put out the blaze, the fact is that the department was badly under-resourced. Other residents have noted that a number of fire hydrants with firemen went to only to find out that they had no water in them. We've heard those stories, unfortunately. There will be many reasons, but one is that putting out fires seems not to have been a priority of the leadership at the LA Fire Department in recent years. You can tell this from the appointment and statements made by the woman in charge, Kristen Crowley. Her biography on the LAFD's website makes plain her priorities and those of leadership. Quote, Kristen M. Crowley is the 19th fire chief of the Los Angeles Fire Department. With her wife and children by her side, Chief Crowley took the oath of office on March 25, 2022, becoming the first female and LGBTQ fire chief at LAFD. How thrilling, how exciting, writes Douglas Murray. Can't you just hear the glass ceilings shattering? Her official bio witters on, quote, Chief Crowley leads a diverse department creating, supporting, and promoting a culture that values diversity, inclusion, and equity while striving to meet and exceed the expectations of the communities that are Chief Crowley's priorities, which is strange because most fire chiefs strive to promote a culture of putting out fires, but not Crowley or the syrupy, stone-cold, stupid media in California who fawned over her. And I don't want to go into specifically her, but it was the idea of implementing DEI policies and the like. Crowley had one job, which was to make sure people don't burn to death in their homes. But that was too much for her. She was too busy, quote, doing the work and taking care of one another. One part of making sure that there were more diverse firefighters in her district was obvious. I am super inspired, she told one interviewer. What by, you may ask? Why a 3-year strategic plan to increase diversity, of course, specifically to increase the number of female firefighters, because it seemed to horrify Crowley and California media that out of 3,300 city firefighters, only 115 were women. People ask me, well, what numbers are you looking at, she claimed, before answering her own question. I'm not looking for a number. It's never enough. True. One of the things that residents of California were definitely thinking this week as they were incompetently ordered to leave their homes was, if only we had more lady firefighters. After all, you can never have enough. Amid the shattering of actual glass, some people even now seem to think that the fact Crowley ticks another diversity box, the proud member of the LGBTQ community, is worth celebrating. And this goes on and on about that. But there was a time when liberals, not least California liberals, pushed diversity into everything. Conservatives warned that there could be consequences, and there were and there are, all around us, because DEI makes excellence a second-order priority. Its proponents treat it like a game, but plainly it is a game that even California can no longer afford. And the reason I mentioned that with Douglas Murray is because that is what many in the acting community are now saying. Their eyes are now open now that it directly affects them. To that viewer's point, that it never, the pain and suffering of others. I mean, they laughed at you when you said you couldn't afford your groceries. Now, as their houses have burned, they are now more, I guess, sympathetic. Leo Leibovitz takes a step further, saying you can blame the LA fire on the woke religion bringing ruin to our city. And we don't need to go back into Bass and Crowley and others, but it's time to take strong measure against DEI, CRT, and the plethora of acronyms used to stir us away from traditional American virtues like common sense and fair-mindedness, and replace them with a lunatic set of convictions meant to usher in utopia by whatever means necessary. We can't afford another day of this madness, especially when our streets are literally burning. And you can look at it from that aspect, or you can just look at it from the pure stance of bad leadership. And that's who Jonathan Lezer blames it on, just bad leadership. And it's important to note this because the media, if you go to the CNNs and many of the other outlets, the mainstream media, the legacy outlets, they're not focusing on the failed leadership because specifically with Gavin Newsom, they wanted him to run for president. They saw him as a young person that, I don't really understand this, but they think has a charisma. I don't personally see that, but it's not my decision to make. But they saw him as a really viable opportunity to run for president and be a viable candidate is what I meant, and run for president. So they don't want this to be the end of his campaign this early into the season, if you will, the 4-year political season, unfortunately. So they're trying to cover it up as much as possible, trying to kind of, and that's why Bass may be getting a little more heat than him, focusing on others to blame. And if you are Gavin Newsom, you focus on the local officials. That's who he puts the blame on. One last thing. I got 2 more things on this. Going to do them real quickly at the beginning of the 7 o'clock hour. We're going to talk just quick segment at the top of the hour because then we want to get to Kelly Fitzpatrick. We have a really important interview with her. She is the chair of the Steuben County Legislature. This has been her first year as a chair, I should say. So we're going to talk to her and see how things are shaping up, if you will, at the legislature. We do have a couple things here about Carter's funeral. We haven't mentioned that this morning. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. Kind of the drama that the media is focusing on, that Pence's wife wouldn't shake Trump's hand, or that Trump and Obama were getting along like old buddies, or that Harris, when she noticed they were getting along like old buddies, rolled her eyes and huffed. That's another big story. There's so many. Maybe we'll get to some of them, but I'd like to hear your thoughts if you saw it. By the way, how much did I was actually listening to it on the radio quickly. How much did Gerald Ford's son sound like Gerald Ford? That was it threw me off. I knew that they had these eulogies prepared, even though Ford and Mondale have passed, but they had prepared ahead of time these eulogies for Carter, and I almost thought at first that maybe it was recorded. When I didn't watch it, so I don't know what it was like if you watched it, but I heard Ford's son. Okay, enough on that. I'm rambling. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Hakem. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. In just a few moments, we'll be talking with Kelly Fitzpatrick, the chair of the Steuben County Legislature. In full disclosure, we recorded that late yesterday just because of time constraints and because of a couple technical issues. So, no, I've not made 3 costume changes on this morning's broadcast. They are just 2 interviews that were pre-recorded, but it's still very, very timely. Also, it is pitch dark out right now, and I don't want you to think the sun just came up miraculously at 7:10. Okay, a couple comments from viewers. Pence lost all credibility when he said he was going to vote Democrat. I don't remember him saying he was going to vote Democrat. I remember him not being clear that he was going to vote Trump. But he could never say again that he isn't against abortion. Could lose any Republican vote possible. Actions will always speak louder than words. Yeah, I would say he definitely fell into the camp. And I don't remember him specifically. I'm not questioning you. I just don't remember him specifically saying he'd vote Democrat. But I do know with his non-endorsement of Trump spoke volumes. So essentially, you're correct. I mean, that's essentially saying that he's going to vote for Harris in a roundabout way. His wife did not shake Trump's hand. Now, Pence did. They said that's the first time they've spoken in 4 years. So, for what that's worth. A comment from a different viewer. May President Carter rest in peace. He is the only Democrat president that I liked, and he was a hard-working man. Thank you very much from that viewer. It was a very touching ceremony. Before that, one last thing on the fire, just because it's an update from yesterday's program. Apparently, ABC insiders are embarrassed and horrified by David Muir's narcissism. We mentioned it yesterday quickly on the show. He had clothespins on the back of his jacket so it would be tighter fitting so he could show off essentially his muscles. It was so the official-looking flame-retardant jacket would be a better fit. The New York Post said they have sources inside ABC that said the network was embarrassed and horrified by the gaffe. Multiple insiders pointed to Muir's Instagram account, which features the physically fit newsman regularly mugging in form-fitting t-shirts with extra short sleeves that show off his physique. This coming from the New York Post. But sources also said that the fashion world move of cinching a jacket is par for the course for one of ABC's leading men. A source told Page Six, quote, his narcissism is quite large in the sense of this kind of thing. I like David, except for this part of him. Anderson Cooper, Chris Cuomo wear all the muscle shirts, but they would never wear this during a wildfire. Another insider pointed out that Muir's uniform of a tight black t-shirt when he's out in the field, but I've never seen those jackets made to look like a fireman's jacket. That matches the first responders. It's pathetic. All flexed muscles and posing. He's actually Zoolander meets Anchorman. He forgets he is the face of ABC News, not Abercrombie and Finch. There you go. That was just an update. So Dr. Jill, appears to barely have acknowledged Kamala Harris at the funeral. We know that sources are saying that there's no love lost between the two, that the Biden family believes that Joe was unfairly ousted. I could see them making that point. Unfairly ousted, blaming Harris, blaming others, and that there's no real friendship there anymore. Nancy Pelosi having said that, because she was a part of that coup, having said that she hadn't talked to Biden since that happened. She's now changed her tune on her role in it. She was very much the godfather at first, saying, I did what I had to do. Now saying, well, he should have got out earlier. But outgoing First Lady Jill Biden took a flinty, it says here, approach to Harris at the state funeral of Carter, barely appearing to acknowledge Harris and not exchanging any noticeable pleasantries as she sat next to the vice president in the front row at the National Cathedral. Harris briefly held Jill Biden's pocketbook for her as the First Lady got situated. But after the VP passed it back, the two stared bleakly forward. President Biden, who was on the other side of Jill, also looked blankly into the distance. Some are suggesting, I am not, some news reports are suggesting that Joe did indeed fall asleep during the ceremony at points. I'll let you be the judge of that for yourself. It was really interesting, though, watching at one point when they're, you can't hear what they're saying, but they're just showing the cameras of all the presidents that were there, and it's a historic moment. No one really talking, a little bit of talking, and it looks like Obama and Trump are carrying on a conversation at a loud, crowded bar practically. They're just going on and on where everybody else is stoically sitting there, and it looked like even Trump saying something to the extent of, I didn't know we looked like we were having such a good time, or that he was having such a good time. But then, of course, in Trump fashion, and I'm paraphrasing, saying something like, but hey, everybody likes me. People like me. People can get along with me. I get along with everybody. Jill Biden appeared to scooch away from Harris toward her husband. Now, this is not the first time this drama has come up in the past. There looks to be some anger between the Biden family and the Harris family. We did see clearly that Harris sighed and rolled her eyes at Obama as Donald Trump and Obama chatted Barack Obama chatting good-naturedly ahead of the funeral. The vice president glanced over her left shoulder to spy the commanders-in-chief having a good time. She then whipped back, staring straight ahead as she exhaled and seemingly rolled her eyes. It's the video's there. So anyway, we don't have to go through the history of why Harris may not like that setup there. Also, you had Karen Pence ignoring Trump. Also, I took, I'm not going to say fence, that word is overused. I took it to have more meaning when George W. Bush didn't shake Trump's hand, skirting almost around him and patting Obama on the belly and moving along. What did you think? I don't want to get into the personal looks and stuff of former presidents and vice presidents and like that. That's not newsworthy. It's just interesting to see when they're all together, right? Bush gives Obama a belly bump. That's what I'm talking about, but walks past Trump. There's other drama we could talk about. One thing I thought was very interesting, the music and the performances and the speeches, and were all very nice, and they talked so much about Carter's Christian faith. And I thought that was very nice, and a very Christian-themed funeral, right? Theme may not be the right word. That's why I was so surprised that Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood played Imagine by John Lennon, which starts off, Imagine There's No Heaven. Also, many have equated that song to kind of a communism type theme song because of its narrative throughout the song. Imagine, basically it has been equated to in the past of the idea of this communist utopia. So I was just surprised, especially with the idea of it starting with imagine there's no heaven. Not controversy, just surprise take after all that. All right, we do have to take a short break because when we come back, Kelly Fitzpatrick, we do have some comments coming in that we'll get to after we talk with Kelly Fitzpatrick. Here's a comment that we'll get to before we go to break. David Muir is a joke, and it shows how incredibly shallow and insensitive they are. This is a horrific disaster, and to think that it even enters one's mind when there's complete destruction to lives is just unconscionable and says it all, and yet people still don't see. Yes, when you're focused on something as minuscule as making your jacket tighter, when you see that destruction, really gives you an inside look at many in the mainstream media and the egos and the narcissism. As I said, very often they make the story about me, 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 me. There's a prime example. So you raise a very good point. Thank you, viewer. We got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Kelly Fitzpatrick. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Aiken. We're broadcasting from the Hesselson studio, and this is the Steuben Senior Services Fund section of our program. And joining us in that studio is Chair of the Steuben County Legislature, Kelly Fitzpatrick. Thanks for being on the show again.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, it's the beginning of 2025, so let's take a look back. This is your first year as chair. It was a very historic year because you were the first woman chair, but I know last time when you were on the program, you said that's not what it's about. It's about the accomplishments, right? So
That is correct.
What did this year look like for you?
This was a big learning curve year, but also a year of a lot of accomplishments. I did a 2024 year in review email for my legislators, and it was very interesting because I went back through all of our minutes and whatnot from our main legislative meetings. So some of the big things that we did was we adopted our comprehensive plan the beginning of 2024. And that's a huge thing. That should last for at least 10 years, and it gives us guidelines for policies and things. So we can look at that plan, say these are priorities for Steuben County, and how do we make sure that our policies are in line with that comprehensive plan.
Sure.
We've invested a ton of ARPA money into our highway shops. Those are just about buttoned up and complete. We've established the EMS service, and we have also established a capital reserve for the EMS service so that if we need more equipment, we can buy that equipment. Right now what we're doing is we've established municipal agreements with varying agencies so we can use the equipment that's already in service and we can use it for our own EMS service. And so we've hired part-time emergency medical professionals, and we're hitting the underserved areas in the county.
I've heard that's been very successful, maybe even more so than originally thought.
I think that there was such a need for it that we don't even realize. We've gotten so accustomed to this area and the volunteer services that we have that unless you were in one of those areas where you couldn't get the volunteers in the rigs to come out and help you, we are oblivious to the fact that there was even an issue. And so we had many meetings about it, but finally got it off the ground. And so that is a major accomplishment that we're very pleased to have done. And I'm sure in the future that we'll have to expand it more and more.
And you had mentioned it's a year of a learning curve. What perhaps surprised you as you became chair, as compared to when you were legislator?
I think that Phil Roach put it best when he said it's lonely at the top. And there are certain things that you end up having to do as the chair that I never really realized. And finding that right balance between how the county manager and I interact, the things that I want to do versus our rules of procedure, our county charter. Sometimes there are things that are done a particular way, and I was trying to buck that trend a little bit, just to let's shake it up. Let's take a look at things and how they're being done, and what can we do to make things better.
Well, isn't that the idea of fresh blood, right? That brings somebody new in with new ideas.
That is right. And I would routinely bring in agenda items and not really mention it until we got to the committee meeting.
Right.
And so that was not making everybody very happy.
Right.
But I thought it was important for the chair of any particular committee or myself to be able to bring whatever business they want to a committee for it to be discussed.
How quick did you adapt to this new role as chair? Are you still adapting?
I would say I feel far better about it right now than I would have told you I did 6 months ago.
Sure.
I feel like some of the things that have happened, the flooding, the meetings with Governor Hochul, some of the other meetings that this position has made me available to and privy to have made me grow as a person, made me look at our county in a whole different perspective. And when I can take that perspective, pass it to my chairs of my committees and try to make a difference in the county, that is the best part. I really feel like I am in charge now.
Now, throughout the year, there has been, well, let's face it, the legislature has been in the news for various reasons. What do you think, and we'll get to some of those in just a moment, what do you think the, for lack of a better word, relationship with the legislatures are at this point? In general.
The relationship amongst the legislators, I would tell you we really get along quite well on most issues. We have a board of 17. There are 15 Republicans and 2 Democrats, although I would tell you that party politics really don't play a factor in the items that we deal with at our level. But 99% of the time, we get along, and most of us are on the same page.
And I'm glad you said that about party politics, because it really isn't, you know, everybody wants to talk Republican and Democrat, but at that level, it's really not about the party politics.
It is absolutely not. The thing that I want to try to impress upon people is that each of our districts is separate and unique. And what might be good for my district, which happens to be the town of Bath, might not be good for what's best in Corning or Hornell or some of our smaller communities that are outside the 3 general big metropolises, we'll call them. So that's really where it comes into play. But it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. You need to know your constituents and know what they need and what's best for them.
And that's why I bring it up, because I want people to realize, and there's going to be an upcoming, and I'll get to that later after we talk, but a petition, how to learn to do petitions. So for people that want to run, they should realize that this isn't Trump-Harris when you're running for legislature. So we'd encourage everybody to get involved, not just at legislative level, but also at the local level in general. But I'll talk about that at a time when you're not here, because time is precious when you're here. So tell us about being chair, what you'd like to see change.
I would like to see all the chairs of my committee be a little bit more actively involved in the preparation of their agendas for their meetings.
Okay.
I would like to see us do a little bit more forward thinking on business of the county rather than always being reactive to things that happen. It seems like we're approving contracts and approving bids and going out to RFP, and that's fine and dandy, but what else can we be doing? We need to look at it from that fresh perspective.
Do you have priorities that you're looking at?
I do. I actually have charged all of the chairs of my committees to establish priorities for 2025. I want those priorities shared with the department heads that are in line with their committees. We need to do more things to attract more people to work for the county. I don't know if we can use headhunters or what we have to do, but there's got to be a way to show that working for Steuben County can be a great thing. We need young people. We need fresh blood. We need to reach out to the colleges, the high schools, and show people that there are great jobs within the county, and not only is it a great job, but you're potentially helping people at the same time.
Why do you think it has been such a struggle? Because it's not just Steuben County, as you know. I mean, we've talked with Chemung County, but just in general, there's such a need for people to work for the county. Why do you think that is? Because it is a good job.
It is a great job, and I really don't understand how people can stay home and not work. I have never been able to do that. I don't know if there is talk that because of the baby boomer generation and them retiring, that there isn't the same amount of population to fill those jobs. And I think that there's some of that, but I think that we saw a really big exodus of people when we have the COVID pandemic. And people have not been willing to step back into those jobs. And I really can't put my finger on why. I would love to get more people involved. And I think we have the ability to do that. You can work from home. We have all these new modern technologies and things that you can do to get engaged in the workforce. I don't know how we have to do that, but I'm sure there's a consultant out there that must have ideas somewhere.
Right.
And those are the kinds of things I would like to look at.
What do you think the biggest issue Steuben County will be facing in the year 2025? What are you focused on when it comes to issues?
I think the biggest issue certainly is trying to get people to fill the seats.
Yeah, okay.
We have a substantial mental health crisis, and I would tell you that is not just a Steuben County issue either. I think we need to normalize mental health concerns just like we normalize going and getting a physical at the doctor's office.
Right.
But in order to provide those services, we need to get the professionals in those seats. I know that the city of Corning has reached out to us. They wanted us to establish a mental health professional within their office. Although we're not sure how that's going to work,
Sure.
we'd really like to expand the crisis team. The crisis team can go out and meet with individuals. They can go with law enforcement and help an issue that is just starting to boil over. And if we can get someone who needs mental health assistance in that program rather than getting them into law enforcement's hands, I think that that will be a much better use of time and resources.
Now, speaking of law enforcement, that's what I was mentioning, kind of the 10-pound, what is it, the 1,000-pound elephant in the room, which is Sheriff Allard. We have him on the program numerous times throughout the year. And there was obviously the lawsuit with the county. Lawsuit's not the right word, but that's the word I'm going to use because I can't think of what the right word is it?
I think Jim always reminds me that it's not a lawsuit.
I know. I can't
so
think of
I
it.
try to refer to it simply as litigation.
Litigation, thank you. That was the word I was looking for. So tell me about the litigation, how that unfolded as much as you can from the county's perspective and where this goes in the future.
The litigation was certainly a black eye for all of us. It's an indication to me that we all can't get together as a team, communicate properly, and work together. The legal team that we have was certainly surprised that the litigation did not rule in our favor.
Right.
But from my perspective, I say let's just leave it where it is.
Yeah.
If we decide as the board that we do not want to indemnify the sheriff, then we simply need to move forward, pass the local law, do it 100% in open session so anyone can come in and listen to what we are doing, and we move forward. My position is that looking through the windshield is a much bigger and broader perspective and a smarter use of our time than looking in the rear view mirror and trying to think that we can appeal this decision.
Right. The appeal, I guess at some point there's that old saying, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging, right?
Yes.
Doesn't it seem like an appeal just keeps something in the news, keeps people talking about something that really shouldn't have, in my opinion, I'm not putting words in your mouth, in my opinion, should have never started in the first place?
I think if we had had better communication and just a better working relationship with the sheriff, that it never would have happened. I think that certain things got brought to the surface, perhaps blown out of proportion a little bit because certain styles of management liked getting things to be blown out of proportion.
Sure.
And when you're constantly being put under the magnifying glass and you're constantly having mud thrown at you, eventually some of it is going to stick.
Yeah.
And I appreciate Sheriff Allard for taking a stand on it. I mean, it's the David and Goliath battle
really is.
because he is one single person taking a stand against the position that the county took.
Yeah.
I am not saying that our position was wrong. I am saying that we, as a group, had passed a local law to provide him with insurance coverage.
Right.
If we now, as a group, decide the sheriff wants to have his own policies, run his department the way he wants to, without the guidance and direction of the county and the legislature, that is perfectly fine. But we can't put the taxpayers at risk for some of those policies and have them pay for any issues that might come from that.
Well, and that seems to be the problem, especially if you do appeal the decision. Taxpayers, I know we hear from people on the show, and I joke, but they're not even in Steuben County, but they've been following this because it's made the news. You know, they may be from Chemung, and they're saying, well, we never heard about this, and then there's the issue with executive session, which we'll get to in a moment. But at what point do you say, okay, we'll lick our wounds and we don't want this to affect the taxpayer any longer because this isn't free.
That is correct. Legal services are very expensive. Some of the numbers that Sheriff Allard quoted for how much money we have spent on his particular litigation aren't exactly accurate.
Okay.
Not all of that has been directed at the litigation that Judge Cook ruled on, but it certainly is a reflection of money that we have invested in looking into his department.
Right. So going back to what I had mentioned with the executive session, that was something that people took a major offense to because we didn't know this was going to happen until the day it happened originally. And of course, the court found against the use of the executive session so frequently. Have you guys adapted and changed since that decision?
I think that they are certainly far more aware of the fact that executive session needs to be used cautiously
Right.
and carefully. I have personally been involved in the legislature now for 9 years.
Right.
I don't feel any of our sessions were done improperly.
Okay.
They were noted for what the reason was, and there's a list of reasons, which of course I cannot spew out, but that's why we have an attorney involved.
Right.
They guide us into that kind of stuff. But in my mind, if people don't want us to use the executive session to discuss this stuff, then let's don't.
Yeah.
Let's have it in open session, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, I think the more transparency, like anything else, right? With the open session, have the conversation, and a lot of the people watch stories like this and they think there's something nefarious, even if there isn't, when you're doing an executive session.
That is correct. And the county, it's a really strange environment. So the county manager really can't speak for 17 legislators.
Right.
Myself as the chair, I can't speak for the entire legislature. They don't like when Sheriff Allard will go out and put out his press releases and do the other things that he does. But I had to remind them at a meeting, you all sitting in this room are elected officials.
Right.
If you would like to put out a statement, feel free.
Exactly.
There is nothing stopping you. You may say whatever you like, just as Sheriff Allard did. He has used this as a great tool, and he has put his cause out into the public mind, and he's done a very good job at it.
Absolutely.
But the rest of us, I hesitate because, number one, Sheriff Allard, to me, has done a fantastic job, and I would not ever openly criticize what he has done. If I have a problem with anything he has done, I'm going to call him on the phone
Exactly.
and say, Sheriff, this isn't really going the right way. We need to adjust our approach. But that hasn't necessarily always been the approach.
And that's what was surprising. It's not as if Sheriff Allard is a closed door kind of person. I mean, his door is always open, and he's so willing to talk to you. And that's why, to your point, just make that phone call.
Yes.
I don't understand. But when it comes for a PR standpoint, if someone took PR in college, Sheriff Allard has done a fantastic job with that because he's been able to get his message out. And very often, it seems as if the county is behind the 8 ball or maybe not even addressing some of the issues.
I would tell you we're not even addressing them.
Yeah.
They're just letting it sit. And I would think the hesitation is that the county manager can't speak for us.
Right.
And my opinion is, well, we've learned a lesson. Let's move forward.
Right. That's what you say. Let this sit. Well, then don't appeal it to bring it all back up in the fresh. These are my words. I'm not putting words in your mouth. I
I would
apologize.
tell you it'll reopen the divide of the legislature. I think that there are some of them in the group that are just so upset about the position that it's brought us to.
Yeah.
That they simply want to appeal because they want to be right. And at this point, in my mind, it's not about right or wrong. It's about moving forward.
Exactly. I would also say the half of legislators that are up for election this year are probably saying, let's not do this, because that's not something that you'd want to, no matter what side you were on.
Yes.
You don't want this in the news because it doesn't look good for the county.
You would be surprised that some of the legislators that are up for re-election don't think that the issue matters. I personally think it's a huge issue.
Yes.
And it's not that you don't want things to be done correctly.
Right.
It's that we've done this. Let's not repeat the same.
Mistake.
Yes. Well, I wouldn't want to call
I'm
it a
saying it.
mistake.
I'm saying.
Let's not repeat and go the same direction.
Anything
Let's
I say
choose
is
a
me
different
saying
path.
it. Yes, anything I say is me saying it, not Kelly. I'm sorry, I get a little passionate about that. And my passion shows you because I hear it almost daily talking about this issue. So if these people running for re-election don't think it's serious, wait till petition season in a month, a little over a month, when they're knocking on doors, and I think they might get a different reaction.
I would agree with you
Yeah.
there 100%. I am fortunately not one of those that needs to go out and get petitions, but I would stand by my my thought
Yep.
processes and my position on this. I voted no to remove his indemnification. Actually, I had tried to table the issue one more time to just say, let's all sit at the round table, let's break bread, let's just resolve this
Work this
in a good manner.
Yes.
But it didn't go anywhere.
No. Did you receive quite a reaction, even though you were on the right side of the vote? Did you receive a lot of reaction when this story broke for the sheriff?
I did get quite a few phone calls and whatnot, and I know that some of the legislators were upset because they actually posted what the roll call vote was on the issue, because some of the legislators were teetering on the fence. They weren't sure which way to go, and they had to decide at the last minute. And when they made that decision, it was like, oh no, I guess I didn't realize it was going to be run on the radio that I voted yes.
Well, it should be. That's going back to transparency. That I guess if you're concerned about which way you voted being made public, you probably should rethink your vote.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Simple
Or
as that.
don't vote yet.
Yeah.
Move to table and set it aside.
And have the conversation. Don't
Yes.
knee-jerk this decision. Oh, my goodness. Yes, you should never be nervous about the vote that you take if you're doing your job. That would be my opinion on that. So before we go, because I've kept you long and you answered my questions so thoroughly, and I do appreciate that, let's end on a positive note. Through this year, what has been your proudest accomplishment?
I am proud to be the first female chair.
Yeah.
I know that that is not what I want people to remember me for, but I think about where I've come from and the things that I've been able to do. I am just a simple girl who moved here from out west when my parents wanted to move back east.
Yeah.
But I established a life in New York State. I went to college at Corning Community College and Elmira College, so there I got my shameless plugs for my alma maters.
Very nice.
I have a CPA practice, and when I decided it was time to give back to the community, I ran for the legislature.
Did you ever think in a million years you'd be chair?
No,
What got you involved in politics in the first place?
just an interest in giving back,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
opportunity presented itself.
And then chair. See, I
Yes.
always tell people it's the last question, then I ask about 10 more questions.
Oh, no,
Is that
that's,
okay?
I don't mind at all.
No.
I think that it's,
But no one ever, I don't think I know you enough to know that you didn't go, I'm going to be chair someday. You were just doing it for the right reasons. And then there you are.
Yes, it was not ever on my radar to
Right.
be the chair of the legislature.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I want people to understand you can accomplish anything.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing that holds you back. When an opportunity presents itself, look at it,
Yeah.
grab it with both hands and go for it.
And that's a great point because, as we said, election season is coming up. I'm going to talk about that petition class in Steuben County on the 1st a little bit later on. But half of the legislature is up. They'll be running for re-election, or maybe people trying for the first time, whatever the case.
Yes.
You saying that you went from just wanting to help your community to now chair. What would you say those people may be on the fence about running or that are running for re-election?
I would encourage anyone who wants to do it to reach out.
Yeah.
I always reach out to the new legislators. I will tell you that when I got on the board, I had beaten Larry Crossett, who was the county treasurer and a legislator.
Yeah.
I was told he was unbeatable.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I scared everybody, but no one really reached out to me. So I don't want anyone
Yeah.
who takes a chance to start giving back to their community to walk into that room and not understand what the job is.
Yeah.
And I've told all of them, you call me. If there's a question, even if we don't agree, it doesn't matter to me. I want you to understand the process.
Yeah.
And if I don't know what the process is or who to talk to, I know who to ask to get you to the right place.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for giving us so much time. Kelly Fitzpatrick has been our guest chair of the Steuben County Legislature. Let's do this again soon.
I would love to do it again. After tax season, of
After
course.
tax season. Happy 2025.
Thank you. Same to you.
All right, we'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. The Frankly Speaking Roof Cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Thank you to Kelly Fitzpatrick, the chair of the Steuben County Legislature. Appreciate her being in on the program this morning. A couple comments from viewers during our interview. Good morning, Frank. Well, good morning. Please remember where people get their climate news: the government and the mainstream media. Ask yourself, what do they have to gain? Sure, climate change is happening, as it has been for 4.5 billion years. Thank you very much. Comment from a different viewer: any ramifications attributable to the despicably implemented Prop 1 yet? Well, that was a mouthful. Not any that I'm aware of. I will, of course, inform you as soon as we hear of Prop 1 as it's implemented, as there will be ramifications, as we know. And I'm sure we'll be talking in the future with the Assemblyman, both Phil Palmisano and Joe Sempolinski and Tom O'Mara, Senator Tom O'Mara, and others will be sure to bring those to your attention as, unfortunately, they unfold. Thank you for the wave. I wondered why you were giving me the questioning face emoji. Thank you. Meant a wave. We don't have that other face up on the screen. Thank you. Okay, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer announced yesterday that he will vote to advance the Laken-Riley Act, teeing up debate on the bill. This is interesting. How many was it? 159 Democrats voted in the House, voted against it, but there were many that switched sides on it because, again, some did learn from the election, saying, especially one that I thought was interesting. I don't know if he switched his vote, but he did vote yes, meaning a Democrat, was Richie Torres. Why I think that's important is he's trying to make himself look, anyway, as if he's very much about public safety, about immigration policies that work, because he's going to most likely primary Governor Kathy Hochul. He is a Democrat, but he had that op-ed about public safety. He voted also in favor of the Laken-Riley Act. And the Laken-Riley Act is so, I can't believe it's not already law, but any illegal immigrant that gets charged with other crimes such as burglary or theft, et cetera, that they will be detained. Yeah, seems like a no-brainer, but 158 or 59 Democrats voted against that. Around a dozen Senate Democrats have said they'll vote to move forward on the bill, though several have stopped short of committing to vote to pass the bill and are pushing for amendment votes, which Republicans will likely deny. The Laken-Riley Act, which mandates detained undocumented immigrants who are charged with burglary or theft, was passed by the House in the last Congress when Schumer was leader, but Democrats declined to take it up. Senate Republicans will need 60 votes, and therefore Democrats support to end debate on the legislation and move toward passage. It's unclear if they'll clear that threshold without amendments. Schumer said Democrats, quote, want to have a robust debate where we can offer amendments and improve the bill. So that's an update, a news update from a story we brought to you earlier in the week. Speaking of New York, talking about Richie Torres, New York Democrats look to counter the Trump administration on immigration. Boy, we do some things here in New York State, don't we? As President-elect Donald Trump prepares to take office, several New York lawmakers said they will examine new immigration policies to counteract his plans to deport millions of undocumented immigrants across the country. So never mind what the American people voted for. These New York Democrats know better. These New York lawmakers know better than what the American people voted for. With 11 days, now 10 days to the start of Trump's second term, many Democrats in the state want the legislature to focus on a suite of proposals to protect New York immigrants and their families. But with only 2 session days left until the January 20th inauguration, reforms are unlikely until after Trump has returned to the White House. Typical for New York. Now, this is kind of something that we talked about earlier, and I think it ties in well, and that is the attacks on Trump. We talked about the breaking story where the Supreme Court decided to allow Trump to be sentenced today in that Manhattan court by Judge McCann. Now, McCann has signaled that he is going to basically not impose any fines or any jail time. And if you didn't join us at the very top of the program, Andrew McCarthy makes the argument that is when he said that, when he wrote that op-ed or wrote that opinion, when he said that they would not charge him with anything, meaning not charge him with anything, not punish him in any way, like with a fine or jail time or anything like that, that gave the Supreme Court the opportunity to say, okay, then this can go forward. So that really paints him in a corner. He can't change that. According to Andrew McCarthy, he can't change what he originally said in theory. Okay, we don't need to go relitigate all that, but the Supreme Court made that decision yesterday, so Trump will be sentenced this morning. Now, that is also important because that means it's official that he will be a convicted felon. Now, he can appeal it, but it's not official, and we learned this throughout the week, that it's not official until sentencing. So all these times that he was called a convicted felon, he really was not technically by the rule of law. It's not until he was sentenced, and that's why we know McCann wants to sentence him so badly. Now, many people believe this will just be thrown out in appeals because so many things were done unfairly, so many things were done that are questionable. So the thought is that it will be thrown out on appeal. But having said that, Trump will be sentenced today. And we were talking about what this means because it sounds as if it's already started. You know, Trump's not in office yet. Inauguration day, 10 days away on the 20th. The attacks are starting to come from the media. Well, Joe Concha, you know him from Fox and other outlets, he said, we once had Teflon John, as in Gotti. Then we had Teflon Ron, as in Reagan. Now make way for Teflon Don, as in Trump. Pity the Democrats and their legacy media mouthpieces, who just can't seem to find any attack line that sticks to the 45th and soon-to-be 47th president. Practice makes perfect, the old saying goes, but that doesn't apply to today's Democrats, who have been smearing Trump for the better part of a decade without dragging him down. They can't seem to find anything Americans, outside of those who still trust the New York Times and CNN, see as truly impactful or worth their outrage. And that leaves the legacy media flailing to find a new negative narrative. Here's just a partial list of lies that have been bounced off Trump's armor. Trump is an agent of the Kremlin. Trump called neo-Nazi fine people. He didn't. Trump built cages for migrant kids. Obama did, actually. Trump's own rhetoric is to blame for 2 assassination attempts against him. You're kidding, right? Trump is a threat to our democracy. Well, until he won the popular vote. But in the last few weeks, as Inauguration Day looms, the charges have gotten downright silly. For example, the notion that Elon Musk is the shadow president and that he runs Trump. For a week or two, the left seemed to believe this effort would deflate Trump's popularity, yet it remains at his highest. He remains at his highest approval ever. I also think they wanted it to knock him down a peg, but I think they also wanted it to cause Trump to really throw Elon Musk aside, because the thought is that Trump doesn't like anybody that gets more limelight than him. He even made that joke about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. when he was getting cheered at some rally and people were yelling Bobby. He goes, boy, Bobby's popular, but don't get too popular. By the way, no one runs Donald Trump. I think you should probably understand that by now. That goes for the media and Democrats. The week's January 6th coverage was equally ludicrous. We had Sonny Hoiston, as I mentioned on the program, compare January 6, 2021 to World War II, the Holocaust, and slavery. But despite the media's wall-to-wall coverage, America greeted January 6th, 4th anniversary with mostly apathy. Per a CNN poll, when asked to name their biggest memory of Trump's first term, just 5% of Americans said January 6th. Well, it's also because it was a broken record. That's what the Democrats were running on. And it became old. It became, played out. If you're looking for a definition of media disconnect, this most certainly would be it. In recent weeks, Trump has broached the possibility of buying Greenland, a topic that we've really enjoyed talking about on this program. Reason, military strategy, of course, as well as the chance to tap the huge island's abundant oil, gas, and rare earth minerals. Greenlanders today can benefit because of bans on drilling and mining. Because of bans on drilling and mining. Result, 95% of Greenland's economy depends on exports and subsidies from Denmark. But instead of looking at the possible acquisition objectively, the media jumped right into their two favorite gambits, fear and hyperbole. Alex Wagner from MSNBC hyperventilated, quote, America will have to decide if it wants to be on the side of sovereignty and self-determination or on the side of imperial expansion. NBC News, Greenlanders are worried to find themselves on Trump's shopping list. The New York Times, make Greenland great again? No thank you, Greenlanders say. Not sure when Greenland was great, but okay. You get the point. The legacy media reflex when it comes to Trump is the same it's been since 2015. Anything Trump seeks to do, whip up a narrative tarring it as unpopular or extreme, throw in words like imperial and emperor, and watch the echo chamber do its thing, albeit to no avail. Now today, Judge Juan Mercan will sentence Trump in the so-called hush money case that was obviously a politically motivated act of lawfare. one of the reasons why Trump was elected. The left would love nothing better in the days leading up to the second inauguration than to repeat over and over again that Trump is the first convicted felon to serve as president. But just like his two show trial impeachments, most Americans won't care. Why? Because the name calling won't lower their grocery or energy bills. And that is the point. That's why I mentioned Joe Concha here. It won't fight violent crime in the communities. It won't end the largely avoidable California wildfires, and it won't secure the border or end the chaos overseas. That's why Trump won in November, because Americans see him as a leader who can turn the mess around. On January 20th, Teflon Don will return to the Oval Office, while the media's influence remains where it's been for some time, and that is in the proverbial toilet. Okay, a couple other things to wrap up on this morning's show. So get your last minute comments in. We've been having a lot of fun. Thank you again to all of our guests. Christine Towner telling us about the Senior Companion Program, and also, of course, Kelly Fitzpatrick, who is the chair of the Steuben County Legislature. Appreciate our guests taking time out of their busy schedules to be on the program. We're going to talk a little bit about our favorite topic of the week, Greenland. We also have a couple other quick hits that we'll get to as we wrap up today's edition of Frankly Speaking. So please get your last minute comments in. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Our beautiful view overlooking historic Market Street in the Gaffer District. That's our Frankly Speaking roof cam, brought to you by Boss Security in Horseheads. Contact them today for all your business and home security needs. Welcome back as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. Comments from viewers. First off, in my opinion, both the Clintons and all the Bidens are felons. Thank you very much for that comment. A comment from a different viewer. I understand that your interview with Kelly, and that was Kelly Fitzpatrick, was done ahead of time. Yeah, just late yesterday. Just time restraints. It just works out better that way. But I just wanted to give her a shout out. She seems very knowledgeable, sincere, and fair. Not to mention as transparent as possible, and seems genuinely interested in all views to try to make a more cohesive conversation. I enjoyed her updates. Thank you. Well, thank you. I'll pass that along to Kelly Fitzpatrick, the chair of the Steuben County Legislature. I'm glad that she could be on the program. It was nice to take a look back at her first year as chair and some of the things happening at the county level. So thank you for that nice comment. I'm sure she'll be glad to hear it. Hey, you know how we talk about Tiffany Henyard and all these people where we say it's important to know who you vote for locally, and with, actually, great segue. We talked about it with Kelly, and I forgot to play this. We were talking about election season coming up, and there's going to be so many people up for re-election. If you are curious, you're thinking about running, here we go. Trying to find, this is the information about that class being held at Steuben County. It's the petition training class for elected office candidates. It'll be on February 1st at 9 a.m. at the Steuben County Annex, located at 20 East Morris Street in Bath, in the second floor conference room. So that was kind of an update after that interview with Kelly if you're thinking about running. But I tie that in because I wish you would run, but also because we say how important it is to know who you're voting for. Did you hear what's happening as we talk about government waste? This is out of the town of Clay, New York. Longtime Claytown supervisor, I'm going to try to pronounce his name, Damian Ulotowski, resigned from his job in mid-December. Then, 4 days later, he asked the town board to reappoint him. Interesting, doesn't seem typical. Well, that change allowed Ulotowski to start collecting his state pension while still collecting his $80,000 a year salary as supervisor. Wow, $80,000 a year as town supervisor. Gaming, if you will, the system. Now, Ulotowski resigned December 16th. Then was reappointed December 20th by the Claytown Board to fill out the rest of his term, which expires at the end of this year. The board voted 5-0 to reappoint him, according to town officials. He abstained from the vote. There was no public discussion before the vote. Just showing you a little bit of how government works, folks. Okay, Trudeau warns Trump that the statehood talk about Canada could distract from the real tariff threat. This is interesting. Outgoing Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau cautioned that President-elect Donald Trump is, and I quote, a very skillful negotiator. And he's worried that the billionaire real estate mogul's statehood push could be masking a more menacing tariff threat. Quote, that's not going to happen, meaning making Canada the 51st state. Canadians are incredibly proud of being Canadian. One of the ways we define ourselves most easily is, well, we're not American, Trudeau said. This was on Jake Tapper's program. What I think is happening in this is President Trump, who's a very skillful negotiator, is getting people to be somewhat distracted by that conversation, away from the conversation around 25% tariffs. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Now, Trump has threatened that 25% tariff. That's why many people believe that Trudeau one of the considerations why Trudeau may be stepping down, or he did step down. But yes, very skillful negotiator. Now, the Kremlin on the other side, this is not Canada, this is Greenland. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said yesterday that President-elect Donald Trump, who hopes to acquire Greenland, he reminded Trump that Russia will protect its strategic interests in the Arctic region. Quote, "The Arctic is a zone of our national interests, our strategic interests. We are interested in preserving the atmosphere of peace and stability in the Arctic zone. We are watching the rather dramatic development of the situation very closely, but so far, thank God, at the level of statements." So basically, the Kremlin warning Trump to stay away from Greenland. Maybe not the way you want to handle the president-elect. Now, Trump, speaking of the Kremlin, Trump has revealed the plans to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Wait till the media keeps harping on this. Well, he wants to meet, and we're going to set it up, Trump said, talking about meeting with Vladimir Putin. Trump declared on the campaign trail that he would lead peace talks between Russia and Ukraine and boasted that he could end the brutal conflict within 24 hours of assuming his presidency. While the president-elect has met with or received calls from several world leaders since his election day, he suggested that he would prefer to meet with Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping after Inauguration Day. President Xi, we've had a lot of communications, and we have a lot of meetings set up with a lot of people. Some have come, but I'd rather wait until after the 20th. Trump said it is to be determined in what form a potential meeting with Putin and Xi would look like, but reiterated that President Putin wants to meet. He said that even publicly, and we have to get that war over. That's a bloody mess. Okay. Oh, a couple comments coming in right here out the door. One comment saying that also happened in the town of Caton. Oh, interesting. Yeah, no, this happens locally. They actually, in that article about the Clay supervisor, it is not, shockingly, it is not rare. This happens quite frequently. So thank you. I'm sure it's happened in many places. All right. Do I have time for this? Keep those comments coming in as we wrap up today's edition. Nearly out of time. I just want to make sure I have my clock up here. So we have a minute. President-elect Donald Trump is set to host Senator John Fetterman at Mar-a-Lago in a highly anticipated meeting. Now, Fetterman has been saying some things lately that, well, as I've mentioned on this program numerous times, some have called the Democrat Party two parties, one of the AOC wing and one of the Fetterman wing. Now, Fetterman specifically, John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, has said, though a Democrat, he's very much in support of Israel. He said he would give Trump's nominees a chance and hear them all out. He also has said, he supported the Lake and Riley Act, et cetera, et cetera. So he's been doing some more, we'll say, moderate things. CBS News reported, citing anonymous sources, that Trump invited Fetterman to his luxurious seaside home in Palm Beach, Florida. That is the plan. Yes, we are going to have a conversation, Fetterman said. Fetterman, who has blossomed into the top Democrat maverick in the Senate, emphasized he does not have a gatekeeper. Quote, "I think that one, he's the president, or he will be officially. And I think it's pretty reasonable that if the president would like to have a conversation or invite someone to have a conversation, to have it. And no one is my gatekeeper." Fetterman has met with multiple Trump cabinet appointees, including Elise Stefanik, Sean Duffy, Pete Hegseth, etc. He's also exchanged pleasantries with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Beyond positive meetings with some of Trump's nominees, Fetterman is also whipping Democrat votes in the Senate for the GOP House-passed Lake and Riley bill. Fetterman was the first Democrat to sponsor the bill. He told Fox News, "I think if we can't, there are 47 of us in the Senate. And if we can't pull up with 7 votes, if we can't at least 7 out of 47, and if we can't, then that's the reason why we lost." That's one of them. That's one of the reasons why we lost, in part. So that'll be something to watch. Oh, by the way, as we go, Congressman Nick Langworthy has introduced critical legislation for the 119th Congress to strengthen New York's agricultural industry and rural communities. He introduced 7 pieces of critical bipartisan legislation for the 119th Congress to reaffirm his support, this again, Congressman Nick Langworthy, for farmers, producers, and rural communities in western New York and the southern tier. 6 of the 7 bills were previously introduced by Congressman Langworthy in the 118th, and all appeared in the base text of the House Agricultural Committee's 2018 Farm Bill that was reported out of committee but did not receive a vote for the full House. He said New Yorkers and growers are some of the most important drivers of our state and district's economy and provide critical food resources to Americans. I can't read any more comments. Thank you to Christine Towner for being our guest. Thank you to Kelly Fitzpatrick, the chair of the Steuben County Legislature, for being our guest. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we will see you bright and early on Monday morning, starting at 6 a.m. with Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox, I look forward to it already.